Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of SpeakuP Monday. You are probably not used to seeing this person in the host seat, but we are giving Brother Ravi the night off. And if you're just tuning in, we are live at Tropical Nomad Canggu, and SpeakuP Monday is all about inspiring people. People inspire people, unity through diversity. Just learning the ropes, and basically we are here every Monday to share stories that inspire humanity to maybe make a change, to battle something that they're going through, or just to be a part of gaining more perspective, because the more perspective we have, the more compassionate we become. So tonight, I am honored to have the incomparable Matilda Carroll sit with me. She is the epitome of a person that walks the walk, who shows up for herself, and in doing so shows up for others. She has been doing so many interesting things. She is a modern medicine woman, an alchemist of sorts. She does Kambo and breathwork and tantra and all things in between. She recently came out of a darkness retreat, which we're going to dive into. But more than that, she is a human showing up for herself, going through all the messy bits of life and encouraging us to do the same. So please welcome Matilda. Yay! Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to have you interview me today.
Yeah, so for some of you who may or may not know, I've known Matilda for about 2 years. I've had the privilege of witnessing her journey, which to this day continues to baffle me and inspire me. Recently, she mentioned that she came out of a darkness retreat, which brings us to the conversation that we're going to have today. We could probably talk for hours and have many episodes that come out of this, but to keep it focused for today, we're just going to focus on the title that she so beautifully gave us about meeting yourself in darkness, and with the theme of this week, which is power in creating your own value. So I want to ask, so when you think of the word darkness, I think a lot of us think of it as this negative term, this scary emotion. As kids, we're taught to be afraid of the dark, sleep with the night lights on, hide yourself under the sheet. And then as we grow up, we start to learn terms like shadow and shadow work, and we think of this as this black echo that follows us around, instead of trying to embrace all the bits that are us. So I wanted to ask you, when you said meeting yourself in the darkness, what does darkness mean to you, and why that title?
So yeah, you just explained it really well. I really believe that darkness is a part of a full spectrum. I feel that a lot of people make darkness and evil synonymous with each other, but really darkness is just a part of a whole spectrum of light. And in between we have the rainbow. So we're all of that, and it's just what encompasses everything that we are, and it's just an aspect that is devoid of light. So when we bring up terms like shadow and things like that, it's just something that's unknown to us, that's not cast a light upon. And my recent adventure into the darkness, because it's something that we find really scary, where, like you said, we usually see it as something where the ego creates something where it's like the boogie monster and the hairy demons, but the demon is just something that is hidden from our inner world, and is something that we just have no awareness of. And in the darkness is really actually where we find our light, and it's something that we're so scared of. And what I really believe is that we're actually scared of our light.
Scared of our light.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think for someone to actively choose to face these demons and have the courage to do so is not something that we, I think, grow up thinking, well, I'm going to go into a darkness retreat and I'm going to face my demons, or I'm going to start facilitating embodiment work and tantra and Kambo and all this kind of stuff. So for you to choose to do what you do now, continue to do so, how did you get here? What was your help us understand? Yeah.
It's quite a long story, but we'll keep it concise. So I've been in health and wellness for over 12 years. I am a naturopath as well, amongst many other things. I'm a bit of a seeker, if you want to call it that. I have endless curiosity about the world and the human psyche, and a lot of my journey started in my late teens. I had a lot of illnesses, and it stems to what I know now is a deep disowning of my feminine. So in my late teens, I had a lot of reproductive issues and pretty much every single reproductive issue under the sun. And it was just a lot of sickness and illness and disconnect to my body and to my feminine, which was what I know of it as now. And at the time, I'd just had one of my ovaries removed and my uterus was stuck to my bladder. I'd had several operations, and at the time what the doctors had told me was that I'd never have kids and that I'd also needed to have a hysterectomy. For those who don't know what that is to have your whole uterus and womb removed. And at the time, my then boyfriend's dad had a really severe brain tumour, and his mum decided to take me to their naturopath. So his dad was being healed with medicinal mushrooms and just a lot of natural things that were keeping him alive longer than he should have been. And so she took me to their naturopath, which I had at the time no idea what a naturopath was. And within an hour and a half, she read my iris, which is known as iridology. It's like a mapping of the whole human nervous system. And she told me what 6 different specialists couldn't tell me. And she was just like, do not have a hysterectomy. That's going to be the biggest mistake. And she pretty much told me the direction I should go, which I ended up going back to my doctors and being like the 19-year-old me telling the specialists what they should be doing for me. We came up with like the medical solution for what I needed at the time. So that obviously took me on a path of just being like, oh my God, what is this? I ditched the degree that I was studying at the time and decided to take up a degree in health science in naturopathy, because I felt this was such a significant change in my life, where there's so many people out there who aren't educated or have the power over their body. That's something that I'm really big and passionate about. It's a big topic at the moment around sovereignty, around the choice of what you have to put in your body, and also the power of making the decisions to have pretty much control of what does and doesn't happen to your body. So as a result, I studied for 5 years, and this was just a massive passion for me to support others to educate themselves in health and empower themselves to live like healthy lifestyles that is tailored for them. As we all know, everybody's body is unique and not everyone has the same. It's so multifaceted. So this is the journey I went on. I thought it was great. I had a really thriving naturopathic business, and then a lot of... So for those who know the hero's journey, there's also the heroine's journey. This is like what I've been drastically going through, and this part of where I went deeply into masculinity around the working really hard, being still disconnected from my body, even though I was doing the natural things and doing the yoga and doing the healthy eating. I ended up having really intense adrenal fatigue and put me in bed for about 6 weeks. And then that didn't really stop me. I got better and then still really pushed it really hard. I was working for a company at the moment, lecturing in integrative medicine, which I felt was a part of my purpose, and being able to support specialists and practitioners incorporate natural medicine into their clinics. And then from there, I still wasn't looking after myself, and it was just this really big lesson of, you think you're doing all the right things, but then you're not really embodying them. And I was the naturopath who still partied on the weekend and drank a lot and worked super hard during the week, like 12 hours a day and then into the night, and not sleeping well, but then telling my clients to do all the things that they should be doing, which I wasn't doing. So that ended up into a route where I ended up getting cancer at 26. And you would think that was the epitome where I turned my life around, but I spent a year with that, going really deep into just myself in a way where I disconnected, and it really brought out my shadow of the lone wolf. I went into a really deep space where I didn't tell anyone, and I sort of suffered alone, where it was such deep shame for me to especially because of my background and what I did for a living, to be like the person that ended up getting unwell. And that really kind of made me reflect on my life. But then I still didn't. It was just how much I was punishing myself and punishing my body, and not really coming into I was in such a disconnect with who I was. And at the time I got over it, and I was living the dream. Like, I lived the dream lifestyle. I was making a lot of money. I was successful in my career. I had an amazing relationship, and I had the cars, I had the boats. It was like the mainstream ideal life, and it's like the typical cliche, you have the perfect life, but you're literally crying in your bedroom every night because you're so miserable.
So I want to touch on that. So I feel like you've gone from, at 19, being told you need a hysterectomy, defying what was considered conventional modern medicine and that, the Western, I guess, philosophies of how to heal yourself. And so you dive down that path. Now you're diving down a path of naturopathy and doing what you feel is right for your body from, plant wisdom, all that sort of level. And then you find out you have cancer at 26, and yet you still choose to continue to kind of face that trauma versus sort of just, hiding under the covers, so to speak, or just letting it take you away. What was the trigger for you to still want to make a change and to do better for yourself in a different way?
I think it was like when I hit the breaking point. So for those who know the Saturn return, around 28, 29, I was quote unquote living the dream, and also extremely miserable, then went down a very destructive path of drugs and alcohol and partying for 4 days and not sleeping. And then it kind of hit a point where I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And it was the typical having to let go of everything and stepping into this space of unknown, where I had to give up my career, I had to give up my identity of being like, I will admit I was very superficial, and it was like, I'm giving up my beautiful home and my fancy things to go live somewhere else that I could on Instagram. And that path was where, like, it was that make or break where it was actually killing my soul. So I ended up giving pretty much everything up. I ended up living with my sister in a house with her mother-in-law. It was just a very, like, I would never tell anyone I lived there, and gave up everything else, but then ended up going into a deep path of spirituality where because I left that lifestyle, I lost all my friends. It was probably the first of many dark nights of the souls, where people that you thought were your friends, that you thought would be there for you, suddenly weren't, because you weren't the person that was buying the bottles in the clubs, taking them out to things, and you kind of really got to decipher who was your friends and who wasn't. And there was a deep period where I was just actually alone, and that turning point where I started not going out for Friday night drinks and going to a meditation center, like going to Vipassana, things like that, where those things kind of, as you start leaning into all the things and saying yes to all the things you probably would say no to, where you're not living the cyclical life of Monday to Friday, go out and party, spend the weekend partying, and then go back to work on Monday. Like, I started going out of my comfort zone and going to particular events and seeing people speak where I wouldn't normally have, which were quite a stretch for me. And as that comes, things just naturally flow into your life. You meet new people and things like that as well. But there was a large period of time where I was just actually alone, and I had to be okay. It was just like the rebuilding of actually meeting people that are your tribe and that are your soul family as well. And that obviously led me down a path of quitting my job and then not knowing what I was going to do. It's like this constant, like, stepping into the darkness, stepping off the cliff, taking that leap of faith. It's all those things, and with those come the newness as well.
It's also, I think, redefining your identity at every sort of checkpoint. Yeah. We had a previous talk where we talked about the role of identity and how we're kind of stripping off that armor. And as we evolve as humans, we take on the identity or the constructs of people around us, what we're meant to taught to believe. So for you, in that moment when you felt like you no longer had the vices or the items of, that would glimmer and glow for people to want to be around you. And now you had these people that you thought had left you and you felt alone and then had to actually physically be alone. What was, at that point, like the darkest moment for you? Knowing that, because right now you're smiling, you look incredible, you've been on this whole journey, but that moment, and that moment continues to come up in different ways. So in that moment, for you to be able to be like, well, like what choice do I have at this point to either go down a path, and you said put yourself out of the comfort zone, meet new people. Not everyone feels courageous enough to do that, and I think that would be really valuable for people watching to understand that in that moment when you thought you had lost everything and you could just choose to just sort of stay in that mode, but you chose not to and still put yourself in a position of fear. But with fear is excitement and growth, and you chose growth. What did that look like?
As many people have had, like, these things kept happening for me, and it was when I had a really traumatic breakup in the end of 2019, and that was kind of the pinnacle moment where I was just like, I don't want to live this life anymore. I don't want to keep repeating these patterns that I keep doing. And I had like a massive emotional breakdown. I moved to Bali, as we all do, for the healing, and I decided to shave my head in the middle of at the end of one of my retreats that I facilitate at, and that was a big moment for me. I'd spent a lot of time in the Amazon in isolation, just doing a lot of medicine, and on one of the nights the shaman said to me, your true power is in your beauty, and it was very cryptic, and that was all she said, and I was like, I don't understand what that means. And when I decided to shave my head, and that really big identity piece around what I defined beauty to be, it was such a stripping. So I shaved my head, I stopped wearing makeup, I stopped dressing well, and I just became almost this blank canvas of redefining who I was as a person, redefining what society had made me to believe. Like where I'm from in Perth, everyone's very like cookie cutter. All the girls look the same. Sorry, Perth. They all do their makeup the same, they all wear the same thing. And it's like a lot of societies are like that. And we, especially as women and also as men, we like kind of lose. I think a part of my gift is I'm constantly redefining myself and letting every time I feel attached to saying that I am something. Like I started becoming attached to being the bald girl, and I loved that look. And now I'm like really hating that I'm having to grow my hair out. But it's like every time I become attached to something, it's like what the darkness is. You keep going into the darkness and redefining, because it's a blank canvas. It's a void space every single time. And in that space, it's magic. You can become anything because it's a manifestation space. So yeah, after this, I'm just digressing. After this breakup, I just was like, I don't want to be this. It was the defining moment because it shattered me so much. And I came to Bali and I just leant into everything that just scared me, and still am, I guess. But it's been a really beautiful journey to rediscover who I was, because it's like the biggest part of us is we give our power away so much, and we have so much external circumstances coming in and imprinting into our psyche. I've spent endless nights just in the jungle where it's like tick, 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 tick. It's just photographic images of everything I've ever watched and everything I've ever seen that's just imprinted in my psyche that I don't even know is happening. Every time we look on social media or every time we see an ad on a billboard, it actually etches into our minds, and we're so unconscious of all these things that are coming into our psyches from as a child, from things that we've been told, and never do we ever question that belief. We just we just believe that. There's never I think that's a great part of to be in innocence and childlike wonder, to always be questioning where the belief came from. Because no one really ever stops to be like, why do I actually believe that? Or why do I like that or like this? So, yeah.
So you stripped away the familiar trappings of what was considered female beauty in the eyes of society and Perth and whatnot. You come to Bali, you've gone through a traumatic emotional breakup that's probably made you feel like you're trying to redefine who you are, find yourself again. And now you're diving into all the things that scare you. And part of that is also kind of, I think, from what it sounds like, just really as children, right? As you said, the innocence of we want to try everything. We want to stick our feet in that mud. We want to jump off that, ledge, and we just think we're invincible, and we have no sense or context for why that's a bad thing, and we go in with that childlike wonder, that innocence. So it's almost like you're finding that for yourself to redefine who you are, that is rooted in authenticity and knowledge. So with that piece, what were the things that scared you that you then dived into?
So I realized when I was in the darkness that I'm not actually scared of the darkness. What people are actually scared of is the inability to be alone with themselves and what comes up in that space. We spend so much time distracting ourselves from feeling. I actually spoke to a guy in the sauna today, and he's just like, fuck that, I don't want to feel anything. And within that, we're avoiding ourselves so much that we don't even know who we are. So, I just lost where I was going.
You're diving into the stuff that scared you.
I was diving into stuff that scared me. Yeah, so I realised that I wasn't actually scared of the darkness. I'm actually really comfortable in the darkness, and it was the fear of what I thought would come up, and what actually came up for me in the darkness was that it wasn't actually a beautiful space to be in. It felt like the cosmic womb of the Divine Mother, and I was held in that space. I had so much fear going into it, but when I got in there, it was just like I create so much fear and doubts in my mind, and I'm wasting so much time in my day just creating these fears that it's actually unnecessary. And the parts that I dove into of myself was just like severe shame and guilt, and sitting in the darkness, it wasn't scary. What I went into was just like deep forgiveness and deep gratitude for where I was, gratitude for all the opportunities that had come into my life, and it actually wasn't scary. And I think the depths of what we're generally scared of is who we are and why we don't feel safe in our bodies. So where I actually dived into when I came into Bali, because prior to Bali, I'd pretty much done everything around isolation. I'd spent like months in Vipassana, I'd lived in monasteries, I'd been alone, sitting medicine in the jungle, and it was just like a lot of things that I physically could go through, but it's like the depths of being with yourself. And I went into Tantra. So Tantra was the last thing that I found really, like, I had experienced a lot of sexual abuse as a child, so that was a really disowned part of me, and I think that was where the reproductive issues came from, because it was just a full disowning of my sexuality. So when I decided to go into Tantra, it was just like, how do I not feel safe in my body? And having to dive into that by myself first. So after I went through the breakup, I went into 18 months of conscious celibacy, and that was
18 months of conscious celibacy.
Okay. So conscious celibacy is different to just normal celibacy. It's kind of like obviously unconscious, but it's like things are coming into my field, guys are still hitting me up, those things are still happening, and I'm consciously having to decide not to play into that loop of, for me, was a lot of needing to be wanted or needing that affection. Validation. I'd been in relationship almost continuously for 21 years. That year was the first year that I'd spent Valentine's Day alone in 21 years. And I watched Twilight Marathon. It was excellent. And I was just like, wow, I just hate being alone. There was so much love addict in me. And that's probably, like, I'd done so much extreme stuff, and I was like, wow, this is the thing that I'm most scared of, to be alone and to not be loved. And it was just this deep dive into having to find love for myself. And I feel like that's, I work in Tantra now, and that's some of the most confronting things for people, because to have to be with yourself, to not have someone external to you providing validation to fill that void that you feel, the not enoughness within yourself, is like, it's huge. And it's like the remembrance of the actual abandonment from God. And it's like that's what we're constantly feeling, this abandonment, so we're trying to fill it with the things to feel the parts of us that we feel are missing, when all it is the love that exists within us is always there.
So you took a very conscious approach to, and you said like I think in the time that's happened in all the different retreats you've been on and sitting with yourself and all the rituals that, you saw the root of where this was coming from, which may not be as easy for others to identify, nor do they want to identify it because it's scary to sit with that. And as you said, there can be shame that is not yours. It is someone else has inflicted that on you, but you've now taken it on and owned that. And for you to be like, okay, I'm going to put that aside and do what is scary and just be with myself and only myself and not take that validation from men, or females. We're all in here. It's that in itself is a step towards being in your own power. And as you've mentioned, the divine feminine and the dark feminine. So, and it was doing tantra a way in for that for you?
Yeah, definitely. It was. So for those who don't know, like the basics of Tantra is the human experience of feeling the whole spectrum of emotions. So I guess that's what in society we tend to stray away from, where we don't really realize that if we can't be in the fullness of our pain, we can't be in the fullness of our pleasure. So we're detaching from pain and we kind of live in this middle zone where we're just kind of okay in these middle emotions, but you're not actually able to experience heightened states of bliss if you can't actually go into the depths of your pain. So that's really where Tantra took me. I give thanks to my teacher, Chantel Raven, for holding me in that. And it took me into deep, like for the feminine, I can't speak on the masculine because I'm not masculine, but it's deep states of rage. Underneath the grief is like deep rage, the rage we feel for all the times that we've been violated, for all the times we've not said no, for all the times that we've suppressed our voice. And that's what unearthed within me. She held the space, and then I went into a tantric relationship as well, and that was just like, that is what the dark feminine is. The dark feminine is extreme levels of love in the fierceness. And when you're able to just go into that, you're in the fullness of who you are. Because if you're suppressing parts of yourself, whether you're male or female, then the wholeness of who you are doesn't get to exist. And then you're really just blocking yourself off from the fullness of life.
And I think for, as you said, that spectrum, I mean, it's safer, it's easier to kind of play in like the middle space where it's, maybe you're happy, you think you're happy, but you don't really know, as they say, as you said, like we can experience a lot of grief with loss, but that's because we experience so much love, or, the darkest night is followed by the sunlight. So it's understanding those highs and lows and be willing to go through that journey in between, which is what you went through. And I think a lot of people, when they hear the word Tantra, they have this, a stereotype, maybe it's just been completely butchered view of, it's people having crazy sex in crazy positions, where it's actually just you with yourself, and diving into that. So how did that make its way into the work that you've now been doing? Like your embodiment, facilitation, Cambo, all these things became part of your toolkit.
Yeah, so I've merged in a way that what I facilitate now isn't a particular thing. I've pretty much merged Tantra into medicine and into Cambo and what I do, and I've had some of you in the audience have sat with me before. But yeah, it's pretty much a uniqueness of the essence of pretty much the body of my whole work and my whole life that gets brought into my sessions, and it's quite a unique experience because I feel as a result of the darkness, not just the darkness retreat, but everything else that I've been through, my philosophy is always, I'll never take anyone as deep as I have if I haven't gone there myself. So through all my embodiment practice, through the depths I've taken myself, I feel like I can hold people in such deep spaces of pain and darkness where they just feel safe to just fully go where they need to go, which is, it's not a container most people generally experience in life. Like, for those who aren't familiar with Cambo, it's a very intense medicine. You're in the rawness of your rawness. You're spewing on yourself. You're sweating. It's a very intense experience where you're fully being initiated. At points, you think you're going to die. And there's some people who sit with me who've never met me before, and it's just an extreme level of trust that they're having to put literally there, like you can potentially die, like physically die, and they're having to put their life in my hands. And what I've learnt from the darkness is all I need to do in that space is to hold a container of loving presence. And the rest of it is the medicine and the power that they have within themselves. And that's what I try to instill in them, that in that experience, they think they can't do it. They hit a peak where they're just literally saying to me, I can't do this anymore. And something magically happens, and they dig so deep within themselves that they find a courage that they never knew they had. And that embodiment piece, because they're feeling in such an intense presentness in their body, they take that into life. And pretty much after that, everything that you think that you're scared of, even now I get scared of things and I'm like, why am I being scared? I've just like sat 2 weeks of Kambo straight. like once you go through that, like Kambo is the warrior medicine. They use it in the jungle to initiate boys into men. It's a full initiatory medicine. It's like when they do vision quests and things like that as well, where you find your inner strength. And in Western society, there isn't actually a natural process where men are initiated into men. Like a lot of ancient and indigenous tribes, they have a process where women actually have it through giving birth, where there isn't an actual natural process for men to go through. So sometimes men end up being man boys still at the age of 50. So that's not their fault. But, sorry guys. But if they don't actively seek it out themselves, then it's not a natural process, and we see that in society a lot as well.
So how do you find that this sort of offering that you provide, which, maybe in Bali and in parts of the world that are quite spiritual, don't seem as, out there, and it seems probably common, versus sort of the Western philosophies in the world, and trying to bridge that gap? Because I think a lot of what you talk about, the elements are ones that everyone struggles with, whether it's insecurities, shame, not feeling like they really know who they are, maybe experience some sort of trauma, they don't know how to work through it. So the root of what you are trying to help people overcome and kind of step into their body and ground is something that is universal, no matter if we've been raised in a Western environment or Eastern. So what is it about these elements that you feel that, if you were to talk to someone who is sitting in Edmonton, Alberta, shout out to Canada, who's never heard of this stuff, why this way?
I think a lot of the traditions, where it all takes you, is taking you back into the rawness of who you are. So as when you were born, you were just this divine being that was this spark of God, and you weren't tainted with feeling not good enough. It was the circumstances in your life that led you to that point, and you forgot how amazing and perfect you were. These medicines and these different modalities, like especially with Kambo, because it takes you into such a raw state where everything, like I just hold you in a space where everything is all right, no matter how you show up, no matter how messy you get, no matter if you cry or shit your pants or whatever, like I will love you in that. And it actually doesn't matter, because we're so afraid of showing up as we fully are, where you can make noises, you can burp, you can scream all you want, and there's just no judgment from me at all. And that's where those medicine spaces take you when you're in ceremony, where it's just like you have full permission to show up fully as you are. And we don't get that in society, where we're having the Instagram filters and we're having to live the perfect life and we're having to succeed and tick all the boxes. It's the magic of this medicine that shows you that like all of you is accepted, in this space, no matter how you show up, no matter if you think you're doing it right or wrong. Like, it doesn't actually really matter. And when you're taken into that space, you sort of just, there's less fucks given. You just get to show up genuinely in life, and there's less hesitation into doing things, because you're like not scared of what people really think anymore. And you're like, this is me, this is how I want to show up, and it's actually perfectly fine, and I'm perfect as I am. And that's that's generally, and I have the power to do whatever it is I need to do in life.
And the thing is, you embraced all those parts of you, which is, as I said earlier, you've actually walked the walk. Everything that you facilitate for others, you've done yourself. And you most recently came out of a darkness retreat. So explain a little bit about what a darkness retreat is. What does it look like? What did you feel like when you were in there? And you said you meet yourself in that.
Yeah, so it's what it sounds like. It's a pitch dark, totally blacked out room. It's different in different places around the world. The one I went to is kind of like, it's on a retreat centre, and it's like a villa room. So it's a small room. It has a small bathroom. Everything's like blacked out, like complete pitch darkness. Then there's double doors, so that in the second room they can deliver you food, and you can write notes and stuff if you want. And then they just have like a knocking system, and they deliver things to you, and then they leave, and then you can open the second door and then get it, so you're not exposed to light. So I spent 5 days in there, and it's just with yourself in stillness. You can do whatever you want. I took my crystal bowl and sang songs. I stretched and did yoga, and a lot of the time I slept. So I went in with a lot of fear, because it was something that I had been edging up to for quite a while. Like, I've done a lot of things, and I've gotten to the heightens of the extreme possible things I could do, and this was the thing that's probably scared me the most, like to the point where I was having anxiety attacks in float tanks, because I was like, this is what it's going to be like. And it's what it is that we're generally scared of, is the unknown. Even when people come and sit medicine with me, they're just like, I don't know what's going to happen. And it's completely like, you actually don't know what's going to happen whatsoever. There's no real experiences that you can liken it to in life. So it was completely not what I thought it was, and it wasn't scary at all. It's not safe to say, but I guess other people's experiences could be different. This is my experience. I experienced it as like I said before, it was like a womb space. It was a space where it was almost like the chrysalis, where I got to melt as the caterpillar and be reborn. And it's very common to a lot of indigenous traditions, where things like the Temescal, which is like a sweat lodge, it's a very small dark womb space, and then you crawl out into the light. So there's a lot of like the darkness where you go into that death period, and then you come out into the light. It's like an ayahuasca ceremony when it's in pitch dark, and then you come out in the morning. It's that real process of rebirth. And this was just so beautiful, because like for me, my whole 7 years in medicine has been very traumatic. And everyone talks about the ayahuasca ceremony where it's beautiful and there's rainbows and there's bliss. Mine's literally like puke the whole time, want to die, want it to be over. That's 80% of my ceremonies. And then, so that's what I presumed this experience would be like, because that's like what I based it on, my past experiences. But then when I went into this, it was just like love, womb. It was like I was with my mum, and it was just so held, like you're just in this little space where you think like all these dark demons are going to come, but which may happen for other people, which I've heard other people have that experience. But for me, it was this whole realization that I had believed that in order to expand it, I needed to suffer. And that was a really deep belief for me. And everything I did was expanding through suffering and extremities and 21-day water fasts and everything that I could just continue to make myself suffer. And going into this space was just this, it was like the cosmic exhale, where I was like, I don't have to do this anymore, and I can actually just soften into my feminine and just be completely held in this.
So you talked a lot about kind of you felt like you had to suffer.
Yeah.
I'm curious now, being on the other side of it, and would you reframe that word as something different? Would it be considered a personal adventure of sorts? You know,
no, it was very my masculine, and I was pushing myself. I had my strongest archetype is the warrior. I push, and I push the edges of everything, and I realized in there that my relationship with power was force, and true power is actually in the softness, as we're rising into a different frequency right now as the feminine is coming back into power, is realizing that the power is actually in the softness and you don't actually need to force anything.
And so now does that make everything that you're now thinking of doing feel more easeful?
Yeah, it's made me realize that things can be done with ease and grace, and they don't need to be forced, they don't need to be controlled. I don't need to it just really loosened my grip on the darkness is the feminine mystery. Within the darkness, within the void, is this endless mystery which we can literally create anything out of. Like for those who do Joe Dispenza, Sarah and I do Joe Dispenza every morning, you go into the quantum. The quantum is the space where anything can be manifested. It can happen like that as well. And it's like this old paradigm that we need to work and hustle and push, like that doesn't need to exist anymore. We can actually soften into a feminine way of working where we can have rest, and it's actually in the stillness that you have the most creative sparks, and the stillness can be done in like a 10-minute block where we don't need to work for 12 hours to achieve something anymore. But yeah, that was...
So it's sort of, yeah, as you said, kind of reprogramming, a sense of deprogramming of what like the matrix as one talks about, or what we're taught in society, that there are just other ways in which we can be but live much more fully.
Yeah.
And in doing so, to live fully is also having to embrace all sides of you, which, as we mentioned before, sometimes we feel those shadows are things that we need to push away.
Yeah.
And kind of redefining what a demon looks like to you. What would you call it now, or how would you describe it?
The darkness taught me that the demons are just inner barriers that are stopping us from living in the true reality of life. And like the demons aren't actual things, they're just like limiting beliefs and programmed thoughts and all those things. It's like what I believe entities are as well. Like they're not actual things, they're just spirals of information coming from the ether that's connecting to us. And yeah, the demons can also be our friends, and with the demons come a treasure, and it's when there's light and consciousness brought to the shadow, it actually becomes a golden shadow, which is actually able to support you in life. And there's so many gifts within that. And it's like a process that we do called Feed the Demons, where you just give the demon what it needs. If you think of a demon or a shadow as like a dog that's been locked in a cage under the stairs, obviously if you let it out, it's going to just try to attack everyone. But if you give it love and attention, because it's been so isolated and hidden away from the world, obviously it's going to come out and attack you. And it's also trying to protect you as well. When you can give it love and affection and be like, it's okay to come out, then it can present itself in a different way where it can actually support you in times of, like, for those who know the story of there's like a black dog. It's like an ancient Native American story where there's a black dog and a white dog, and it's whichever one you feed. Like the black demon dog can still help you, protect you from the other tribes, but it doesn't need to be out all the time as well.
It is that sort of that black and white, that yin and yang that we're taught to look at as just being full parts of us and that are whole. And I think what's really interesting is you've been on such a, and I know we're just touching on it because we don't have all day, many more episodes to come, but that, you know, you've been on such a journey, and like, as we mentioned before, you've been through the trauma, you've been through putting yourself in situations of suffering, putting yourself in situations of fear and environments to then kind of see the light, but you see the light in that darkness because you found that within yourself. For others who are maybe, you know, haven't experienced that level of pain or haven't gone down this years and years long journey, is this type of work that you do for others or for yourself something you would recommend to others?
Of course.
And why is that for someone who hasn't yet maybe had to experience or is willing to sit with themselves and experience that level of discomfort? Why do you think it would be beneficial for others who are watching, maybe living in a more conventional environment, to go down a path of what could be considered growth, but also fear?
I guess it's like, for me, it's kind of, I guess it's not the same for everyone else, but it's kind of black and white. Why live the human experience and not fully be here? Like, fully be here in the fullness of everything that life has to offer. I know that's not necessarily blatant to everyone else, but like, there's a part of us that needs to awaken that there is so much more to life than what meets the eye, and having to work and do things we don't like and be in unfulfilled relationships and not actually get to experience life from the heart. And yeah, it's a living, like, I always explain to people that feeling an emotion takes 90 seconds. We feel it, it's discomfort, and then we reach for something that will stop it. So we'll reach for the phone, or we'll watch television, or we'll buy food or drugs or alcohol or whatever, and it's that discomfort that we haven't been taught to be with. Like, I think this is something that we should be taught to be as children, but as children we're told to be quiet and not cry, and then we're taught these behaviours that this is wrong, when if we just fully experience it, like on the last night, I went into this spontaneous, like, heart de-armoring. Even with all the work that I do, I still fall into habits of just not experiencing things. And it felt like a lightning bolt had shot through my head and fully made my heart explode. And it made me feel everything that I'd possibly been suppressing for 20 years. And it was really intense, but I was in the darkness and I had no option but to feel it. Normally, I would
You couldn't reach for any kind of ice.
Yeah, normally I would just get advice, or I'd been feeling it in the nights leading up to it, and I would just get up in the middle of the night and go on my phone. And in this space, I was like, I'm fully just going to let myself go into this. And it was layers and layers and layers of everything that had happened to me throughout my life, where I'd created a armor around my heart, and it was going through those layers, and it took me to a point where I felt like, because you're in the darkness, it feels like there's no container, like it's this vast space that just doesn't end. And I was just like, I don't know when this is going to end, like it's just taking you into this unknown. And I was like, I just need to feel this. And the most important thing that I always remind everyone with any work they do is come back to your breath. And I relaxed my body and breathed into it and just breathed. And I was just like, I'm just here now. And as I breathed into it, it just started to dissipate. It probably went for a few hours, but just allowing myself to fully feel into like everything and every heartache that I'd ever had. And as a result, I feel more open. I live life more fully. I did experience severe integration after, but that's another story.
Well, I was going to say, because I think that it's very confronting, as you said, you're having almost this film reel of everything that's probably happened in your past. You literally only have your thoughts to sit with. And I think what's incredible is that you choose to continue to put yourself in these scenarios to further, as you said, maybe just, reach those edges of your discomfort in order to fully add value. And I think we talk about the theme for this week was the power of creating your own value. And I think you're doing that by literally putting yourself in all the situations that you think would make you see the edges of yourself, the parts that are maybe a bit messy, but in that mess is beauty. And I think one might look at your social media profiles and say, oh, this is this beautiful woman with all this artwork on her body, adorned in all these jewels, and she speaks so confidently. But, I would be curious to know, like, what you're struggling with, like, day to day, because you are still human, and the way in which you're showing up in that way, some might have a perception of you that is not the full picture.
Yeah, I get a lot of people think that I'm extremely confident, but I'm actually not. And I was quite scared of this talk today. And
because you're human, you're real.
Yeah, and I guess I do make a large effort to show up authentically. If I'm not on social media, it's because I'm like, I can't fully show up for my audience in an authentic way, so I'm just not going to go on, and I'm not going to try to be happy. And I get on and I cry and I show people that this is real and this is real life. And as much as I do have states of extreme bliss, I do have extreme lows. And it's like my pendulum swings within one day quite a lot. Like, I've been crying all week in intense pain because after the darkness, Sarah's my housemate. She went in after me, and we make this joke of a term we've coined called after the darkness, because there's all this stuff that's happened now since the darkness retreat. But yeah, it was like Pandora's box got opened after that retreat, and as much as it was beautiful during the integration, like that's the biggest thing that I always stress to people who do medicine. You may have this blissed out experience, but the time after is literally that's where the ceremony is. If you're not integrating that, then I explain medicine ceremonies as you're the spiritual tourist. You go off and you do something. If you're not integrating it, then there's actually probably no point in you doing that and not integrating the lessons into your being. And this last 2 weeks has literally been like suicidal depression. And I've gone online publicly and said that as well. And it's also not a space of like, I'm very conscious of it, so I'm not probably going to act on it, but I'm observing myself being like, wow, I'm in a really low state right now. And also observing myself and not judging myself, because I'm like literally my ego's grasping for every single thing. Like I ate a box of 4 cinnamon buns. They're very good. To a point where I was like, I feel so sick right now, I think I'm going to vomit, but the habitual pattern was just happening. I was like, this is happening and it's still going in my mouth, but it's so deeply wired and programmed in me, and it got to a point where I was just like, yeah, this isn't serving me. And it's only in those times you can make those changes and actually make the choice for yourself that like these old patterns need to go. And like with anything, you have this healing crisis where things need to get worse before they get better. And we have these moments where I think a lot of people are going through that right now as well, where old patterns are coming up. And if you're not allowing yourself to be with them, they're going to just suppress down again, and you're just going to be re-experiencing that loop again.
And it sounds like despite, as you said being a spiritual tourist and now coming into that integration phase, I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, that you would choose to do it all over again.
Like the retreat. Yeah.
Yeah.
I say all the time, I think I'm actually more comfortable in the darkness. I keep going, I need to go back. I want to go. I'm leaving Bali in a week or so, and I want to do it again because there was such a profound space to be in. Like the stillness, the letting go of everything. I would highly recommend anyone thinking of it. I've had quite a few people tell me they're going to do it now because there's no space where you can just detach from everything. Even though if you decide to like, oh, I'm going to get off my phone for a day, those cords are still connected to you. Those people wanting things from you are still connected to you. In this space, it's like everything cuts off. I love waking up and being like, I don't need to message anyone back. I don't need to post anything on social media. I don't need to answer those emails. I just can completely take care of myself and what I need. And in that space, it's literally like I said, it's a womb space where you're just receiving nurturing and nourishment. And like I had... like a common thing that's known is about after 4 days, your body naturally produces a lot of DMT in the brain. So you go into like altered states. That started happening for me like after 2 days, which was like just my brain flooded with DMT. And that within itself shows the extraordinary ability of the human body to just be producing endogenous chemicals to heal you. And like I'm a big believer that the human body has everything that it needs to fight anything if you give it the capacity to do what it needs to do. We're just sort of like filling it with toxins and not nourishing it, that we sort of take its power away from it. Like Cambo is nature's vaccine, that's what it's called. And it has the ability to heal the world, and we forget the magic that nature has provided for us, and also the power of our own human bodies.
So on that note, because I think when anyone reads your bio, or even just seeing the titles in the promotion that we had, it was like modern medicine woman, alchemist, combining sort of these rituals. What define alchemist in terms of who you are and what you offer for others?
I don't actually know what I do. This is the common thing that comes up against me. I think I'm just me, and it's just this combination of everything. I think I'm not an expert in anything. I'm the eternal student that is constantly curious about life. I think if I had to define something, the alchemy part is being able to turn darkness into light. When you're in the darkness retreat, you find it's like there's a self-illumination within our body that we're actually unaware of. And the body has these like little lightning cells within our, it's like when you see those fish that live really deep in the sea and they have the ability to illuminate their own bodies. We have that ability as well. And for anyone that's been in like ayahuasca ceremonies and stuff, that's what happens. You see like the whole electrical system within the body. And then when I was in the darkness retreat, I could see the light of the veins and the light traveling through my hands and through the electrical systems in the wall and things like that as well. So yeah, I feel like it's anything where like I can transmute pain, I can transmute anything where it's just a lower frequency emotion or state, and I can sit with it with them to just hold that space for them to actually transmute it themselves as well, because we forget the power of the human heart to transmute anything. And like shadows aren't necessarily made to be dispelled, they're made to be brought back into the heart to be transmuted and also communed within our bodies so that we become whole again.
And I mean, and we don't exist without our shadows. So,
Yeah.
you know, physically we wouldn't. If we walk around without a shadow, that would be a cause for concern, I think, and what many movies are made of. So I think, you know, I think it's incredible. I think you, as we've said before, when I asked a question about what you're doing, I didn't actually mean what you're doing for income or what you're doing to fund your lifestyle. I was just saying, what are you doing? And that is that you are just being. You're being you. You're experiencing life in all the beautiful, messy, extreme ways. And by doing so, you're giving others permission to do it as well and to trust you to guide them down that path. So I have a question for you. It's a question I ask all the guests. If Matilda had to bottle herself up and sell it, what would the top 3 ingredients be? And these are not, you know, we're not talking like pepper and salt and whatnot. We're talking, you know, just terms that one would describe of you or of yourself to others. If we could put you on a shelf and sell it.
Like attributes? Mm-hmm. Darkness would be there.
I think we're on brand. We're on theme.
Courage, mystery.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so we could talk for hours. I feel like I go on so many different tangents with you. I do want to give the audience an opportunity to ask some questions. And in about a minute or so, I will give you an opportunity to, leave us with any final words.
They can ask questions now. No,
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Anyone have any questions?
Because
Hi.
that was for the water, not to wrap up. It's for more water.
I love your talk, so thank you for that. I'm Rich from South Africa, and what you said about that initiation process for young boys really made so much sense, because in South Africa there's a ritual also for young boys to go to the mountain and they get circumcised there. But I am mixed race, so I never went on that voyage. So for this adult man that missed that initiation process, what did you recommend is like step 1? If you're living in a Western society and you have a brand and businesses, if you don't have 5 days to go to a darkness retreat, like what do you recommend is like a starting step?
I think for men, like fully embodying like being the witness, so meditation, as cliche as that may sound, being able to observe yourself. I think we live in a world where we're so reactionary, so if you're able to sit with yourself, sit with your discomfort, be able to observe what's actually going on with you without actually being in it, that's just a really great place to start. And obviously from there you can go into things like joining a men's group, if that's like something once a week. Obviously in Bali there's heaps of that, but that can also be done online as well. I think men have as big of a brotherhood wound as women do of the sisterhood wound, and being able to connect with men in that way, which is like the indigenous way of like being in a tribe, and there's just a beautiful connection that men can have that they don't necessarily have with women. It's like the men thing to go do. I think it's a beautiful place to start. But I can also talk to you off camera around that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Beautiful interview, beautiful. Not done, more to come. So, integration.
Yeah.
Now, you brought up a couple of times about the challenges of integration, and so let's go deep. So, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've had to integrating, and how did you overcome them, if you did overcome them?
Oh, so many. I guess with integration, what happens is, depending on what the modality is, it's opening you up to all these parts of yourself that you're either unaware of or you are aware of, but when you go through that process, it's like it suddenly is spewing out in your reality. This is a big warning I give to people that are doing very intense medicines where they haven't necessarily done the personal development work beforehand and they don't have the awareness of themselves. So you go into these really heightened states that are great at the time, but then what ends up happening is your shadows, because it's like you're going into a full Kundalini experience, and then your shadows just literally spew into your reality. So all those things that you've kept hidden start showing up quite rapidly in your field, and you can continue to ignore them, but then the universe is going to keep showing you these things, and it's going to show you where you're not in alignment, and you can't, once you've done the work and you've seen, you can't unsee. So those typical things were kind of happening for me. There was a lot of I've been through a lot of relationship stuff, so just like the things that we discussed before around sexuality and the ways where I just wasn't something I'm going through right now is how I'm not choosing myself in relationship, and then as a result I'm choosing men who aren't choosing me and aren't fully committed to that relationship either. So it's like these kind of rude awakenings that you go through, but it can be in deeper senses. Like for other people it may be health things, and you keep getting these health conditions that keep showing up in your reality, or you might get like in Bali seems to show you very harshly, so if you're not listening you'll suddenly have that scooter accident, or you'll have that health issue. I think maybe in other countries, because the energy is very different, you don't see it as much, but yeah.
I've got so many things, and I can see my brother over here nodding every now and again, yeah, and I love that one as well. One of the things you nodded about was about this freedom from having to work hard for stuff, that it can't just be with ease and grace, you said, right? Which I was like, yeah, no, oh man, little one for me there as well. So you mentioned earlier on about suicidal thoughts. Now, the reason why I ask you this question is because there's people, SpeakuP Monday started because 3 friends of mine committed suicide in 1 year and no one saw it coming. They looked good, smelled good, had everything going that everyone thought they wanted, right? But obviously there was other things going on there. So, and because, as we said earlier on, we go deep. We go deep. There may be some people here who are watching, right, or even in this room, who have those suicidal moments, tendencies. I've had them, right, years ago and so on. So what was coming up for you when you mentioned suicidal? How was it showing itself? And what did you do with it?
I personally experience things very somatically, so post the darkness retreat, everything that I'd suppress is like 20 years of stuff. This is how I explain it. 20 years of stuff came out in an hour. So if you can imagine every pain you've ever felt that you've suppressed in your body coming out to relive itself. So it's like all the times where anything had happened, any trauma, anything that I experienced had happened, I chose to not feel it. And even all those little bits and pieces, it came out very abruptly, and it was a lot for my body to be able to handle, because it's just like, it was like, if you wanted to visualize it, was like I'd fallen in a heap, and it was such deep hopelessness, despair, like to a point where I was like, I don't know how to fix this, and I don't know how to make this better. Even with all the tools in my toolbox, everything that I've learnt, I'm just like, I don't know the way out of this. And I like to talk about it quite publicly, even though people get, I don't say it to get sympathy or people to send me messages or be like, where like it is nice that people are there for me, but I never say it to get sympathy. I just want people to know that having these thoughts and feelings is okay, and especially from someone like me, people think I'm very put together, that it's okay, and we experience these things sometimes and you have full permission to feel them, but it's also like with everything else, it passes. I experience quite a large range of emotions in one day. I wake up and I'm like high as a kite and I'm so happy, and then like sometimes by 2 p.m. I'm like back in suicidal depression. But it's like if ever anyone's read Eckhart Tolle, like this too shall pass. With the highs, we can't remain in the high all the time, so sometimes people are always chasing the high, and especially with like plant medicine, things like that, they constantly want to be in the bliss because they don't want to go back into the low. But the pendulum needs to swing, and with the highs need to come the lows. So around that is more so that you can feel these things. Sometimes it doesn't mean you need to act on them. The conscious, like since I started speaking about it, I've had a lot of people reach out to me and be like, oh, I've been feeling that way too. And it's like with the awareness, we can all sort of be going through it together, and then you know that you're not the only crazy one. And it's like with any emotion, you're just like, oh, I'm going through that too. And sometimes it can be blaming it on the moon or things like that, and we can also have a laugh about it. I'm very big on my intensity of the work that I do is kept sane by the laughter that I have in my life. And Jazz, who's one of my best friends and stuff like that, like we just laugh, and it's like life is the cosmic joke, and it can't literally be serious all the time. And if you don't have that softness and that playfulness and that laughter, things get pretty freaking serious, and then we get kind of stuck in the process of the seriousness, and we just kind of need to, it's just like the duality that we need to like pop in and out. And we do like, I probably know a lot of people here, especially in Bali, do the deep work, but it's also like finding the softness and the playfulness in it as well, and that knowing that it's okay and it's not going to last forever. And if you're able to reach out for support, talk to other people about it, know that you're not alone in it, then the load gets to be shared. And like I shared before, like I went through, when I had cancer, I took myself to another country and experienced a month in a hospital by myself because I didn't want anyone to be there for me. And it was a very extremely painful month of my life where I thought I was going to die, and I was just like, didn't tell my parents, didn't tell anyone, told my boyfriend not to come. When I reflect on that now, I'm like, that's really crazy, because I have such a disparity in life now where I have so many beautiful friends and beautiful community around me now, and I'm like, why would you want to do it alone? And it's kind of like an ingrained thought where you can't, like, my dad was in the military and he had 2 little girls who he taught, never show pain, don't cry, don't show weakness. That's how he grew up. Like, I don't blame him for anything. That's how he grew up as well. And he didn't hug me till I was 29. He had issues like, I had to force him. I'd have to go to his house and hug him, and he'd have his arms down, and I had to keep doing it even though it hurt me that he wouldn't hug me back. And I'd tell him I love him, and then over time I think I did my own work on my own inner masculine, and he ended up just shifting, and now he tells me he loves me all the time. But I'd presume a lot of people have grown up that way, and we're programmed to just like all those little things that we're told around just like not showing emotion and not showing pain, and that was something that was deeply ingrained within me.
Wow. And the last one, and pass it on. So, okay. So you mentioned before, and I love your openness with this, that despite all the tools that you had, they weren't going to help you, right? And this thing of, and this too shall pass. So you mentioned earlier on that breathing is really important, because some people might be watching this now saying, well, I'm there, how do I get out of it? I haven't got the tools like you. So what one thing could I do, right, that could help me and support me to get out of it is one. And then sitting next to your incredible flatmate here, because there's some people who also think, I don't know, they might go off what you said about doing it by yourself. They might think, I'm going to go and find some plant medicine and do it myself. I can do it, right? Now, you've got an incredible person next to you, right? So then how do you select, and which importance is a person like this to guide you through this whole process. So there's a few questions there rolled into one. So the first one was, which one thing, one practice, if it is breathing, can someone do? Because you mentioned before you were out of tools and you got all the tools. And the other thing is that the importance of having someone there with you. And the last thing was, how do you find them? Like, how do you,
So, I would say the breath is, there's a reason why breathwork has become so popular recently. It's been an easy, accessible thing. We did a 21-day online retreat during the midst of COVID with these beautiful friends that I have that we facilitate breathwork with, and we just did a...
Can you give us a practice?
Sorry?
So if there was one breathwork practice that you could show people now, what would that be? Because it's something practical they can take away with them.
So something really simple you can do is just box breathing. So I do 6, you can do 4. So it's 4 breaths in, 4 seconds hold, then 4 breaths out, 4 seconds out, and then 4 seconds holding. So just in, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, 1, 2, 3, 4, out, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you're just doing it in a box. So just imagine that it's a box. That's a really simple way to calm the nervous system down. I like to do extended exhales as well. So extended exhales. So you just breathe in normally, then that calms down the parasympathetic system, so you're not going into a state of stress as well. And they're just really simple things that we can do. There's a million things online and sources that are free as well. I can add them if you have a resource page as well. And there's heaps of beautiful practitioners and things like that out there as well. And segueing into that, I think you should always trust your intuition and feel into someone. Not all modalities, especially plant medicine, the way I describe plant medicine is it's a tool and it's neutral. The person facilitating it is like it's an instrument. It's whatever the intention is. There are a lot of not so great shamans out there with not so great intentions. So be really discerning. If your body feels something, trust your body. If it's like, there's something that just doesn't feel right, trust your gut instinct. Always make sure that it's in a safe environment, and as soon as you see something that seems semi-dodgy, your body will always tell you, because your body has no ego or past memories to convince you otherwise. That's things like kinesiology. For those who don't know what that is, it's like your body will tell you like the responses. So always trust your body. And also do your research on the person. I always like to have someone else that I trust if they're going to recommend someone to me. Even within breathwork, people really downplay the power of breathwork. Breathwork is taking you into altered states, and in altered states your whole physical being is opening up, and in that space anything can literally come in, especially in places like Bali. I like to warn people that there's a lot of black magic, and it's naive for us to believe that there aren't other entities out there. So it's always important to be careful, because those spaces can take you into a space that creates more damage than what you had originally gone in there for. Is there a third question?
Anyone else got a question? I know you have. Stop being shy, people. There you go. Any question? Remember, if you're thinking about it, someone else wants you to ask.
I had to write it down, hold on.
You got to write it down? So I prepared it.
So great talk. I've learned a lot about you. Jerry from the UK. So what did I write down? Right, so how do you capture your thoughts during the darkness? And the reason why I asked that is I went through depression about 2 years ago as well. And somehow I wrote some notes during the depth of that depression that now when I look back on it, I'm thinking, wow. I traveled a lot, and during my depression, I wrote down, I can't believe I traveled, I wasted all my time, I threw my career, blah, 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 blah. And when I look back on it now, I'm like, wow, my mind was really, I was in such a space where I looked at everything that I previously and now think was a great thing, and I looked at that as a negative. So I was wondering if you, when you do enter these periods of darkness, if you do anything like journaling or recording videos or creating art to kind of capture that moment in time during that darkness.
My thing that I like to do is I like to write poetry. I find the darkness takes me into a space where I'm not as mentally, like, it actually, like, it's like the darkness is very feminine. It takes me into a space of emptying, and when I'm emptying I almost become a channel, and when I'm able to do that I actually can go into deeper intuitive spaces because I'm so in a space of despair, I don't want to work. So I'm like, I'm just going to lie in bed all day and do artistic things that actually support me, because I think to get out of that is to come back into a space of joy. Like, to help you to come back out of the darkness is to come back into a space of joy. And what brings joy is, I always recommend to clients, is do what you like to do as a child. And I used to love painting and like art and things like that. And it's like, go ride your skateboard if that's what you like to do. Go do the things that don't actually you don't need to succeed in or achieve in. This was a practice that my teacher gave to me, and it blew my mind that I couldn't find something that didn't have a goal. So she was like, go do something that doesn't actually have an achievement quality to it. So if you think about that, it's just like everyone who's listening, I wasn't allowed, like, I would find that I'd so automatically do things that needed a goal. So I couldn't read a book unless it was like a fantasy. I only read like self-development books where I was learning. So something that you couldn't do something that had an achievement, a quality to it. If I went to the beach, I walked really fast so I would get exercise. I wasn't allowed to go to I couldn't go to the beach to meditate because I was still doing something. I had to just sit and be. And I blew my mind how hard it was for me. Like, in my spare time, I'll like read an audiobook, or there was no time where I was actually I found myself sitting in the backyard and I was counting the lights. We had these streams of lights in our backyard. And I was like, wow, my mind is just so automatically drawn to just having to do something that's achieving. And I think that's a key to a lot of people, where even in our spare time where we're having self-care, we're actually still doing something that has an achievement base to it. So that might have diverged from your question a bit, but do something that doesn't have a success component to it, or something where you're achieving. And if you really deeply think about it, a lot of the things we're doing, there's actually still I'm like, I'm going to sit on the beach and do breathwork. And she's like, you can't do that. And I was like, it was really hard for me to struggle to do something, even if it was like, I'm going to paint a picture, but I can't take a photo of it and post it on Instagram. Like, let's just do something where there's just pure joy in it, that you're not achieving anything, you're not trying to succeed in anything, and just you're being in presence.
No, I actually find that, is this on? Even though now I'm fine, I found that I have the same kind of struggle of, if I'm not working and I'm commuting, even if I'm going 5 minutes, I'll try to put my headphones in and either listen to music or just filling that void. Yeah. And sometimes my phone will die and I'm like, and then I'm like, actually, let me just be alone in my thoughts. And I learned to be alone in my thoughts during the depression as well. So I think, I feel like that was my kind of ritual, kind of going from boy to man. When I went through that, I really saw my past trauma and things that were said 15, 20 years ago that came up in that kind of moment. So I resonated with what you just said there as well. Even as you were describing it, trying to think of doing something just for the sake of doing it with no end goal, I was scratching my head, what would I do? I don't even know what I'd do. I'd lie down, maybe, I don't know. But even then, I'd probably be stretching my back.
It's a good inquiry for people.
Yeah.
And also just move the stuckness. Sometimes it's just stuck energy and you just need to move your body, like however that looks, whether it's you just put like a high vibe song and dance the shit in your room out of it, just like move, whether you do like some flow yoga or something. It's just generally it's stuck energy that is just emotion trying to move itself. So sometimes we just kind of curl up into a ball and that energy can't move through us. So,
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else?
Don't be shy.
But I've noticed, now with this, often what I find is it gives you a break and more questions come into your mind. So
How long have we been going?
she's good. Look at her. She's doing beautifully. So good. So any more questions?
I wanted to ask, I know so there's a couple things that come to mind, some quotes, sayings that as I listen to you and how you engage with everyone, and a lot of it is that we look at our past. Sometimes we can get stuck in it, and the way you approach is like our past is a place of reference, not residence, and you continue to move. And I think that energy movement, as we know, is meant to flow, and that's how you sort of show up, but you still are met with triggers, as we all are. And I think, are there any fears you would have of like removing yourself from this environment? And by this environment, I mean a place like Bali, which is, very conducive to this type of work, to moving into other parts of the world. And what could those triggers look like for you? Because those are probably what some triggers look like for people at this very current moment.
So I'm actually leaving Bali soon, and this is something that's come up for me a lot. The thing that always comes back to me is like I have a really large beauty piece of what true beauty actually is, and this is I've reflected a lot on it in the darkness, because the darkness taught me what beauty was. It's like this endless emptiness, and it's actually an absence, where we think beauty is like what is cast light upon that we can see. Like beauty is actually void, and because I'm going to America, that still comes up for me a lot. Okay. Here is different because everyone's quite down to earth. No one really cares about things. I don't wear shoes most of the time. I don't actually look like this most of the time because I'm just like, I'm so comfortable in myself and in my body. But then when you're in an environment where things just are constantly, you're bombarded, especially in America, and I'm going to LA, where that's a really large emphasis on beauty and that beauty industry. And I know a lot of women relate to that, whether they're conscious or unconscious of it, of what true beauty really is. And it's like what we forget, that it's really an inner radiance within ourselves and not an external factor. I think people here may be more prone to that, where they can look at a woman and she can just be beaming inside, and it sometimes doesn't even really matter what they look like. But I think for me, how I always explain to people with triggers is, if it's a trigger, then it's clearly something I need to look at within myself. And I think that's a great superpower I have of self-reflection, probably from all the Vipassanas, but being able to reflect within yourself. If a trigger does come up where someone is triggering you, it's generally something that you're not dealing with it within yourself, and it's generally a shadow aspect, even if you're like, I'm not completely like that person at all. Like an example is my ex-partner was cheating on me, and I was like, how is this a shadow of mine? And what that was really showing me was, how am I cheating myself in everyday life? And that's how I was reflecting it, and I was so triggered by that. And it's just deep, radical honesty with yourself to be able to look at whoever, like generally it comes up a lot in relationships, so the relationship would generally mirror to you quite strongly the things that you're unwilling to look at within yourself. And then it's like, just think of your partner, and whatever they piss you off about is generally the shadow that you're unwilling to see within yourself. It may not be the direct emphasis, but it's generally the essence of what that is.
So how would you describe to someone who's maybe watching this, who isn't as familiar with looking at people as a mirror and as a form of projection, what could that trigger feel like?
So you generally will have a physical response. So if it's a trigger, your body will go into response, whether you're getting really heated or pissed off. Like if it's a genuine trigger, you'll have a somatic response to it. If it's just something like, oh, they're doing that, and you're like, oh, they're just kind of like an idiot, and you're not really having a response to it, then that's not so much a trigger, that's more just an observation that the other person is an idiot.
And what could they do in that moment that maybe they're not ready yet, or they don't know necessarily what the next step is in terms of diving deep, versus just like, as you said, asking themselves that question? would you point them towards some materials, topics that they could like search? What would be some quick sort of ways to just have that sense of awareness and acknowledgement of what they're feeling?
I think just the acknowledgement is the first space to acknowledge, like once you know that and once you have the awareness, you start to pick it up quite quickly. Once you're like, oh, this is the thing, and I'm having the reaction. If you're able to stop and observe yourself in it, it's the stopping and the pausing. It's why the breath is so important. If you're like, oh, I'm feeling this somatic response and I'm like getting really heated and this person's making me really angry and upset, it's like when we're angry in traffic. It's never the person that cut you off. It's the energy of what they're doing. And you end up getting like road rage because it's actually something that your dad did to you 20 years ago. And if you just start by having the awareness of it, it tends to actually work quite quickly, where you can have the observatory effect of stopping, breathing. Stopping and breathing is the most simple thing you can do. Stop, have 3 breaths. It's like if someone sends you a text and you just want to text them back straight away how you're feeling in a really reactive way. It's like stop, breathe, just like observe what's going on. I know not everyone necessarily has that. It's a practice. Like once you develop the practice of that, it's a constant thing. I still have to do it where I'm like, I'm not going to send that reactive. I'm going to write it in my notes, send it to my friend. She's going to tell me not to send it. And then I'm going to edit it once I've processed that emotion and realize it's not really about them and it's something that's probably from my past. And generally when you do that, it just makes the situation so much better and you're not like spewing your projectory hate on someone else.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think, and just to start kind of wrapping up, I think it really comes down to, as you said, whether you're meeting yourself in darkness, it's sitting in that stillness. If you're in an environment that you feel triggered, it's allowing yourself to just be with yourself and sit in what could be that discomfort, to actually allow yourself to face that and then move forward. And in doing so, and you're a walking example of this, is that's how you create your value, because that is, as you said, it comes very much from yourself. You talk a lot about, self-sovereignty, and it's just kind of embodying that from a truer state. So what's coming up next for you? How can people reach you? How can they work with you if they want to hear more of your story? What's next?
If you want to work with me, I'm going to be in Bali for the next 12 days. I've got a few spots for one-on-one campo sessions, so you can find me on Instagram. I am Matilda Carroll, RRL. We'll put it on the page. And I'm going to America in a few weeks to do something I can't talk about.
But we will hopefully see it or hear about it.
Quote unquote. I am on NDAs and I can't talk about it. But it's going to be big, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, around supporting people that are completely new to the work and have no comprehension, to a space where they don't even know that they need the work. So I'm very passionate about supporting people just really come into a space of sovereignty and power within themselves, within their own body and their own lives, and not be affected by the things that are being fed to them, and come into a place of awakening.
Amazing. Okay, well, I'm going to give you about a minute to think about what your last words, any things that you want to share that maybe we didn't get to. And I know we could talk, I said, for hours and go into so many deep dives, so I'll give you a second. I just want to take this opportunity to thank all of you beautiful humans in the audience. It wouldn't be the same without the questions, without the energy, and just seeing those smiles of acknowledgement and also wonder. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you to our online audience who may have not been familiar with some of these terms and modalities. And our hope, as we said, is that, having you on here was the idea is that your story will inspire others, and you continue to inspire yourself by walking the path that you do. So hopefully someone takes something away from that. I also want to thank Tropical Nomad staff and this beautiful new space for having us. Thank you so much. And lastly, brother Robert Ian Bonnick right there, who has given me this seat. And as some of you may know, he created this platform, as he mentioned before, in a response to want to just help people be better by doing better in response to, Monday is the highest rate of suicide. So he wanted to give an opportunity for someone to hear a story that maybe helped them change direction or just feel less alone. And you've been doing it now for almost 3 years. We're coming up on episode 200, every Monday without fail. So thank you so much for creating this space and for allowing me to sit up here. Thank you.
Thank you to you for being a great interviewer.
And with that, I will leave it to you. So I just want to say thank you to you for being vulnerable, being raw, coming out of something very recent, and as you said, still integrating and sharing that. And I think in you just being who you are and creating value for yourself, you've created value for all of us. So thank you for giving us the honor. And there you go. Last words?
I really resonate with your philosophy that there is unity in diversity, and it's a really beautiful piece, because I think right now in this world the disease is separation, and the truth is, if you experience it or not, there is oneness, and you actually are never alone, and we are completely held and we are completely loved. And the fact that everyone is living in isolation right now is completely breaks my heart, and it's coming back into a remembrance that home is truly in our hearts, and in that space we are all one. And that's something that I guess not everyone necessarily experiences, but it's a philosophy that is actually completely true. And yeah.
Thank you.